looming over Congress. Joining us right now is House Minority Whip Steny Hoyer. Good morning to you, Congressman. Before we get to what's now looming upon us, I do want to get your thoughts on the tax bill, and specifically, given that you didn't support it, how you react and think about some of the statements that some of these companies like AT&T and the parent company of this network have put out around bonuses and other investments that they plan to make as a result of it.
Well, the issue is are they going to be sustained? Are they happy about getting huge tax cuts? I'm sure they are. As you know, 83% of the $1.5 trillion in deficits will be going to the top 1% in America and 17% to everybody else. So obviously there are people who are very happy about this, and it appears that it's going to have some positive effect immediately. But what we are really concerned about is the long-term effect of this, the skewing of benefits to the wealthiest in America, the fact that Medicare is going to be exposed to a $25 billion cut next year, and that 13 million Americans are going to lose health care. So we think there are going to be a lot of very negative effects of this tax bill, going to undermine the ability of the United States to fund priorities. So that, yes, there are short-term benefits, apparently, and that's not surprising. But what we've seen is the long-term downside of these tax cuts, whether they were in '81 or in '01 and '03, they didn't work out for our economy. Right.
Congressman, it gets very complicated very quickly.
Yeah.
Becky and Joe and I were talking earlier. Joe was asking me whether today Democrats have to effectively root against the economy, root against the market, if you will, over the next year or two as it may go up, given what you're talking about. How do you think about that?
Well, as I say, I've been here for some period of time, and I've seen the downturn of what can be short-term stimulus, but long-term adverse impacts, both in terms of the deficit that is created and the stress to the economy. As I said yesterday on the floor of the House, as they were talking about their tax cuts, much of the rhetoric was very much like we heard in '01 and '03. And what did we end up with at the end of the Bush administration? The worst economy we've seen. So hopefully, I don't want to wish against the economy. I want to see employees doing well and our country doing well. Leader, but I think this was an irresponsible act.
Yeah, Leader, those weren't corporate tax cuts for Bush. The rationale of trying to get the U.S. Corporate sector more competitive with some of the tax rates around the world. I mean, even Democrats in the past have signed on for that.
And we're for that.
Okay.
We should have, as you know, President Obama in the State of the Union some 3 years ago said we needed to bring the corporate tax rate down so that it would be competitive with the rest of the world. We think that's correct. We would have supported that. As you know, Joe, this was a totally partisan bill, and unlike the '86 bill, which was a bipartisan bill and was paid for, this was paid for all with deficit spending, which we think will have ultimately a downturn on the economy. But yes, we could have worked on, and we support, in many respects, bringing the corporate rate down so that we're competitive with the rest of the world. That's a good thing.
When you use the 8317 number, I mean, by definition, when the main part of the act is based on lowering the corporate tax rate, are you throwing that the 1%, so the corporations are part of the 1% benefiting? Is that how you're doing? Because I've seen figures where if you take out the corporate side of things, the middle class shares a much better part of the tax cuts. If you exclude the but you know what I mean. If you're just going to say, look, if you're going to say 83%, and most of that is the corporate tax, which you agree is something we should try to do. But I don't know if that it just sort of, you know, it's apples and oranges kind of.
Well, it may be, Joe, but the point that we make is yesterday, Chairman Brady and Paul Ryan, when we initially passed the bill through the House, what they talked about? They talked about the average family making $59,000 for people. They were the people getting the money.
Corporate tax cuts aren't popular. That's never going to be, you know, it's like cutting corporate taxes. Even though it might be something that you think we ought to do, it's never going to be, it's never going to poll greater than probably 30%.
Well, the bill doesn't poll very well, as you know. Only a third of the people think this bill is going to help them or help our country. So that it doesn't poll well. We don't think it's going to poll well. But the point is that if you're selling a bill for the struggling people who are working day to day and week to week paychecks, and then you give 83% of the benefits not to them. It's hard to just argue that this is what this bill is about. It's not about that. Yes, you're right. Bringing the corporate rate down, being competitive with the rest of the world can have a long-term benefit on the creation of jobs. But it's a fair figure when you hear this constant discussion about how this is for the struggling working people of the country.
Have you seen those numbers on the individual mandate? I get that too. And so the 13 million that lose insurance are going to decide not to buy it because they don't have to pay the penalty anymore. But you've seen that. But you've seen that figure that the people that pay the penalty, for the vast majority, 80% make less than $50,000 a year, and here they are paying a tax on not getting health insurance. So that's just designed the wrong way, isn't it?
Well, you know what, Joe, this was a Heritage Foundation idea, which was everybody needed to take personal responsibility, and they needed to have insurance for themselves. And the Massachusetts model, which was applied in the ACA, was that, look, if you can't, you need to have insurance because everybody needs to be covered, so you're not passing the expense along to somebody else. But if you can't afford it, we'll help you. That was the premise. And the 13 million people, many of them are going to say, look, I'm not going to go. Why? Because I'm healthy, I'm young. And what's that going to do to the premiums of everybody else? It's going to raise it because the risk pool will be more expensive. That's the point. And the whole point of the mandate was to sort of like car insurance. If it were only the reckless people that drove, boy, you couldn't afford your car insurance. But because the risk is spread and most of us don't have accidents, it brings down the cost to an affordable level for us. The same principle applied.
Right, I understand. It seems like there's a better way. There's unintended consequences.
Well,
the way
frankly,
that was done.
Joe, let me say there was a better way. If we would have come together for the last 11 months and worked in a bipartisan way, I think we could have come up with some really good improvements to the Affordable Care Act. But that was never the intention of the Republicans, either on taxes, which was this is the most partisan bill, secret bill, non-transparent bill, rushed to